Because it is my guilt, I claim your grievous miracle. Make my chest hurt with regret. Forge your punishment and nail it deep. Shape my guilt once again.
Alright, Blasphemous. See, me being a big fan of the Metroidvania and Soulsborne genre, I can really say that it's hard for me to find a game with the same level of accomplishment and progression that has you evolving by learning the difficult patterns and overcoming the challenges thrown at you by the developers. Now, this was a pleasant surprise for me playing Blasphemous, as the game has really good pixel art. It has fun and interesting combat, even though the story can be super confusing, more confusing than any of the games that FromSoft has ever put out. With that being said though, this makes this dog petting simulator one of my top favorite Metroidvania titles to date. However, as good as the game is, the platforming and some of the wonky collision detection can distract from the overall enjoyment of the game. Let's get the history lesson out of the way first. The game was released in September of 2019 by Spanish studio The Game Kitchen and published by Team 17, and I'm here sitting in 2022 playing the game for the first time. Man, I swear it takes me a while to get to the good ones. Blasphemous is a 2D action platformer with hack and slash combat taking place in the world of Civistodia. I believe that's how you pronounce it at least. Let's talk plot, shall we? Yeah, this is not the game's strength in my opinion, as the game does as good of a job at explaining what is going on as a From Software game. This is most likely deliberate, as the Souls inspirations are obvious here. Most of the lore, or however little of it there is presented to you via item descriptions or short and cryptic NPC interactions throughout the game. Now, the game also uses a lot of Latin terminology with heavy religious themes, which I find to be pretty cool. You take the role of the penitent one, aka the main character. You are trying to bring an end to what people call the miracle. It's a form of either a good or bad thing that happens to people depending on the perspective of the individual. No one knows why, but one thing is for sure. It's basically a curse, and it manifests in horrific ways more often than not, as evident by the land and the imagery in the game. Now, this is all I was able to piece together, and I refuse to go down the rabbit hole of fully understanding all of the game's convoluted religious themes. But who needs to know all of that nonsense when we all know we're here to save what truly matters? Game's 10 out of 10. The voice acting is exceptional. It's a great way to maintain the atmosphere and tension of the game at a very uncomfortable level.
Sorrowful be the heart, penitent one. Welcome to Albero, sanctuary to this humble brotherhood of the kissers of wounds.
These people are not having a good time, and you, my cone-headed friend, are here to put an end to all of it. After dying about 1,000 times, that is. In terms of the visuals, the game is sporting a sharp, colorful, and beautiful 2D pixel art style with great animations to boot. The level of detail in the backgrounds is just as impressive as the foreground, as the backgrounds help tell the story of the dilapidated lands. Just look at how creepy some of this stuff is. It really does help the aesthetics and feeling of dread throughout the game. This is a game full of sorrow, sadness, and never-ending suffering, if it wasn't obvious already. I mean, look at the manias. Even they are depressing. If it wasn't for my friend Doggo over here, I would have had no reason to keep going, as he was literally the brightest aspect of the game. He was just such a good, happy camper, unlike this guy over here who has seen better days. The world is populated with decaying bodies and ruined Victorian architecture. It's your standard exploration style game that takes you from one type of landscape to the next with minimal loss in pixel art fidelity and detail. Needless to say, the graphics are the most impressive and immersive aspect of the game. Oh, and check out this weird and equally impressive pixel art cutscene.
Penitent one, you who carry the painful guilt in your cracked hands. Lend it to us and alleviate our burden. Lend it to us and wipe away our tears. Because it is an act of penitence.
And here we have the meat and potatoes of the game, the core gameplay and mechanics. Blasphemous is heavily invested in its hack and slash gameplay to the point where the magic doesn't do much for me. The progression is fair and simple, and you'll find many shrines where you can rest, heal up, refill your healing flasks, and equip a single passive ability to your weapon at the cost of all of the enemies respawning in the map. Once in combat though, it's your standard hack and slash affair. You get a 3 to 4 hit combo with a very generous parrying time that will deflect most of the enemy's attacks and will open them up for counters. Now you also get a pretty cool dodge slide ability with some iframes typical of a Souls-like game. The combat is fun even in its simplicity. You're gonna get more sword techniques and increased strength as you progress and find little shrines such as this. You use your Tears of Atonement aka souls to purchase sword upgrades, but your strength will automatically increase each time you find a new shrine. You're gonna want to find these things. I'm telling you, the game does get tough later on. Now magic is pretty underwhelming in Blasphemous. Called prayers, they use fervor aka magic points. Now you can equip one and only one at any given point, and this is without visiting any other shrines, which I find it to be their only redeeming quality. Now I found most of them useless for damage output though, so much so that I only used 2 of them and only on very specific situations in the game. I think I'm gonna swipe left on the spells overall. Now while I was out and about exploring, I did find this character pretty interesting. A little weird looking, but pretty interesting nonetheless. He is kind of cool as he's willing to upgrade my vial flasks in exchange for some other items. Now when you do this, you are going to lose one of your flasks in the process. Then you have the rosary, which is where you'll be equipping some of the more passive abilities that have to do with defense, offense, and resistance to elements. For side activities, there are many collectibles in the game that will keep you busy and are actually fun to look for, as most of the collectibles are in areas of the map that are at times difficult to explore or figure out. This is where the Metroidvania aspect of the game comes into play, as it also gives many of the areas of the map a reason to be re-explored once you've obtained an item or the ability needed to overcome whatever obstacle was previously in your way. All of the collectibles serve a purpose, as they give you some sort of item that will help the character progression in a way and may even change the way you traverse the map in general. The enemies can range in difficulty and can go from your basic peon to your typical douchebag you hate to fight, so you would rather take the long way around than to fight them. The game does an excellent job in the boss department. The bosses are not only difficult and challenging, but I rarely felt as if any of them were unfairly difficult. They all have this learning curve that can be overcome by practice and adjustment of tactics. The only time I personally became frustrated at a boss was when I was too stubborn to switch my own equipment to adapt to the situation. Now after learning patterns and adjusting my equipment though, things quickly changed for the better. All of the boss encounters do come with their own strengths and weaknesses, and will test your skills and your willingness to use the game's mechanics in many different ways, such as parrying, dodging, and the magic system. Now this is not to say that you have to master all of these mechanics, but it will certainly make your life a lot easier. Defeating a difficult boss in Blasphemous is utterly satisfying, especially after going back to the drawing board to reroute a new tactic tailored specifically for that enemy. Now for the platforming in the game. This is what I have the biggest issue with. The game has some great things going for it, and it executes on these things very well. Platforming is not one of them, however, for me, as this is a little bit of a miss. This is disappointing as the game is first and foremost a 2D action platformer. Most platforms are fine, but the poor collision detection on ledges and ladders are the worst sin this game makes. Exploring and moving from one area to the next is fun, until you find a ladder. If you're not exactly where the ladder wants you to be, you will just fall to your death, and you will die a lot, learning a valuable lesson. Always think twice before jumping towards that ladder. I died to many instant death spikes due to this, and it becomes frustrating, along with the frustration of missing a ledge grab by mere pixels as demonstrated here. I don't get it. I don't understand why the game could not give you a greater pixel area to detect a ladder grab or the ledge grabs. In a game where you're expected to die a lot and learn from previous deaths, it becomes frustrating when you die from a poorly detected ladder grab, and annoying when you waste time trying to get up onto a platform when the game does not register. Now the game does have some puzzles, and even though none of them were particularly difficult to figure out, they were a pretty cool addition to break some of the action. With my biggest complaints aside, the game never became repetitive or boring throughout the whole campaign. I had a roughly 15-hour playthrough, and most of my deaths were a good learning lesson Blasphemous has some of the most amazing pixel art I've ever seen. Simple but fun gameplay mechanics with a dynamic map and really cool boss fights. The atmosphere and eerie world makes you feel the suffering the people of this world are going through. And even though the vague and confusing story did not make much of an impact in my experience, the fact that the platforming doesn't always work did affect my overall enjoyment of the game. However, thanks to the game's engaging overall package and this good boy over here, the game does earn a very special spot in my game library, and I would highly recommend this title to anyone that enjoys 2D action platformers.